is a lot right now. Are you feeling it? We all need new tools to help us walk through the chaos with grace, ease, and compassion for each other and for ourselves. In this podcast, you'll hear from parents, educators, and other experts who can bring perspective to the monumental job of parenting. It's time to level up and be warriors for our kids and our communities. This is the Warrior Parent Podcast. I'm Marci Mitchell.
And I'm Debbie DiManno. As parents, we understand that it really does take a village to raise our kids. We hope that this podcast serves to create and support that community for you. Join us as we discuss and practice our core tools, which are proven mind-body techniques that can be used by anyone to improve your life on a daily basis.
Today we're speaking with Assemblymember Dr. Cory Jackson of the California State Assembly about his trio of mental health bills, including adding mental health or ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences Screening, for all California youth. Hello and welcome to the Warrior Parent Podcast. Today we're speaking with Assemblymember Dr. Cory Jackson, DSW, MSW, and current member of the California State Assembly representing the 60th District in California. Assemblymember Jackson served on the Riverside County Board of Education in 2020 and was the founder and chief executive officer of SBX Youth and Family Services, whose mission is to break the cycle of poverty and violence through mentoring, education, and community organizing. Dr. Jackson graduated from CSU San Bernardino, where he received his degree in political science and served as a member of the CSU Board of Trustees and chair of the Santo Manuel Student Body Board of Directors. He is also a graduate of California Baptist University, where he received his master's in social work degree and a doctor of social work degree. Welcome, Dr. Jackson.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness, poor Marci, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, it gets kind of weird when you hear people read it,
Yeah, so you have been a very busy man, and we are honored to have you here today. We know you have a big schedule, and as I was doing a little recon to find out a little bit about your background, I was just thinking, my goodness, this man must be 100 years old. This is a lot of work. So without further ado, Dr. Jackson, tell us a little bit about your background, how you became so incredibly passionate about social work, clearly getting your PhD in social work, and then how then that moved you into becoming the Assembly member.
Well, interesting enough, at the age of 30, I decided that I wanted to follow my dream of having or starting my own nonprofit organization. And I'm one of those young people who, every time I was asked to volunteer to do something, I always said yes. And I found out that I love service.
Yes.
And there was a time where I kind of shied away from it. And I realized I'm not happy unless I'm doing something outside of myself.
Yes.
I can't just have a regular job and then just go home and then do it all over again. There has to be something in between that.
Yes.
And so I started my own nonprofit organization, SBS Youth and Family Services, and my first programs were youth mentoring programs. And then, of course, when you're working with young people, you just realize that it's a ripple effect, that if you put a circle around a young person, you understand that, well, you know what, within that circle is their family. And then you have to draw another circle and start talking about, well, what are their neighborhoods and the communities that they live in? And then what are the systems that they're interacting with, whether they know it or not, right?
Yes.
And I just realized that, you have to do more and more and more to be able to ensure that the whole ecosystem in which a young person is in, that you can't just do one part of that if you're really going to make the type of difference that you're trying to make.
Yeah.
And it just so happens after probably year 8 or 9, pandemic hits.
Ah,
And
yes.
I'm wondering, number one, uh, what am I going to do with all this time since I have to work from home too? And of course, when you're in the people business, but you can't interact with people personally, then you have to reinvent how you serve.
Yes.
Yes.
And eventually I just said, number one, first I was just going to get my master's in social work because I was trying to figure out how in the world can you make a difference or truly learn the best practices on how to make communities and people healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really what I went into get my master's about is I was just trying to increase my own knowledge and increase my own skills so I can pour it back into the organization that I founded. And social work was more than I ever thought it was going to be. It was a dream come true in terms of an emphasis on social justice, an emphasis on, I did not know the majority of mental health clinicians are actually social workers. I had no clue that was a, part of it, which is then got me into really understanding how to, in terms of mental health, in terms of child development and brain development and,
Yes.
all the good stuff.
Yes.
Um,
We're all about all those things.
Yeah, you are speaking our language.
Yes. We're drooling. You can't see us, but we're drooling. This is
little bobbing dog head nodding.
Yeah.
So
this guy's
fervently.
he's our angel. Oh my goodness.
and as soon as even while I was in my master's program, I mean, the lingo, uh, terms and strategies and theories and all that stuff, immediately my fundraising and my grant writing just went through the roof because now I connected with, speaking the language, right?
Yeah.
I was already doing a lot of it. I just didn't know what I was doing or that actually people pay to be taught this stuff. And I was already doing it in the community myself.
Yeah.
And so when I was doing my master's, the pandemic was still, I started my master's before the pandemic. But I finished it during, and then I said, well, what am I going to do now? And I was encouraged by my professors to say, hey, you should continue on with your doctorate. And so I just decided, I never knew I was even smart enough to do it, and so I went through it and I just realized that, hey, I can really do some things with this. And in the meantime, I'm already on the County Board of Education and redistricting happens and a brand new district is created where I live in Moreno Valley. And I just said, number one, if I don't do it now, I would have to wait another decade to have a chance to do it.
Yeah.
And I just felt that, at least I'm going to give it a try. And it worked. And it turns out that I'm only one of 3 social workers out of 120 members of the legislature.
Wow.
There's a reason you're there. That obviously that district popping up was a big sign for you.
Yeah, and I'm the only social worker in the state assembly. And so
that's divine intervention, if you're asking me. Yes.
Absolutely. And I knew, of course, mental health, the data started to show just how mental health was becoming more and more of a crisis, particularly with our young people.
Yes.
And on the County Board of Education, I led the fight to, making sure we put more of an emphasis on mental health for our young people in schools. I think at that time, the U.S. Surgeon General had already declared mental health a national crisis.
Yeah.
And he said, particularly with our young people, it's a crisis. And so the first thing I asked for was to allow the speaker, ask the speaker to allow me to start the select committee on California's mental health crisis. And so I'm leading laser focused on how do we continue to find ways to deal with the California's mental health crisis. And of course, my colleagues trust me due to the particular focus of the training that I have.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Wow. Wow. So that's like the light bulbs are going off for me about the statistic you just gave me on there's only 3 out of 100 and what 130.
120. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Wow. Well, that says a lot about sort of what we've been up against, right? So Marci and I have been, banging our heads against the wall since about 2017 doing this work. We actually create apps. Well, we created an app during the pandemic because, as you said, we had to shift. We were doing live workshops to help youth with mental wellness. And then we pandemic came, we couldn't figure out a better way than to create an app using wellness tools. So we teach meditation, EFT tapping, heart-brain coherence, bilateral tapping, yoga. My background is exercise physiology, nutrition, hydration, like all those things for youth. So we were doing these live workshops, and then that all came to a screeching halt. So here we are with you. But
yeah, and it's interesting because we had the same realization that you were talking about, where originally we just had the teens in there doing these workshops, and then we realized, man, if we're going to have the teens, we need the parents involved because it doesn't work with just one piece. We're also connected, and we needed to bring the families, and then we started trying to bring the schools. So that same idea of the community taking a village to support the kids and families.
No, absolutely. And I think, and it can just get overwhelming, right? The idea that because many in the social work field focus really on the individual and doing the, individual therapy, the individual type stuff. I focused on the macro and meso, just in terms of groups, specific groups, and the larger society and community as a whole. And it can be daunting. And unless you really know those, various techniques and best practices, and even if you do know them, the amount of work that it takes to make sure that you're holding up the fidelity of the practice, so that you're getting the type of outcomes necessary, right, is also can be daunting as well. So I think overall we've got to help people do better, and empower more people on how to do these things.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I specifically want to talk to you. I mentioned this a little bit about the ACEs, and the ACE test honestly was a game changer for me. I had lots of adult illness, lots of diagnoses that no one could really figure out. And it was, again, one of those things that dropped straight from the sky into my lap. And that was the book on Childhood Disrupted. And so I took the test, and everything started to get clear for me about the ACEs. And I'm hoping you can speak a little bit more about the ACEs. This concept that you're actually introducing, trying to introduce a bill where this can be part of a screening process for our youth, I feel like is the most important work we could do. I know the Surgeon General, as you mentioned, was really big on ACEs, and but it's the implementation. You mentioned being daunting. Like, where do you start with this, right? So tell us more about how you learned about ACEs, and then a little bit, if you can expand on ACEs, and then tell us about your bill. I'd love to hear about this.
I first heard about ACEs during a community presentation through Riverside County. And this is when, of course, Kaiser's study in regards to ACEs was really starting to take off.
Yes.
Probably
20,000 patients, right? It was a huge study.
Yep, yeah. And then, it's about, gosh, Riverside County started to make ACEs a priority maybe 5 years ago or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
After the pandemic, it's hard to tell in terms
Yeah,
of time.
I know.
I still haven't
Right.
recouped.
It's all a blur.
Recouped all that blur.
Yes.
But so I said, wow, now this is very interesting. Um, and the idea that depending on your ACEs number also starts to depict what type of life you may have
Mhm.
if there are no if it goes untreated,
Right.
right?
Correct.
And that magic 4 number in terms of ACEs, that once you hit the 4, a score of 4 ACEs, um, your life expectancy begins to diminish, right? Now, with that, of course, now I'm still doing youth programs. I started to take a more serious look at those, and I said, wow, how can I incorporate this
Yes.
into my work? And then in my master's program, we took a deep dive into ACEs and
Oh.
how to mitigate ACEs.
Mhm.
And so actually at this time I had maybe 400 young people in Riverside County that I was serving and mentoring. And I
Mm-hmm.
made the decision to do universal screenings for ACEs.
So
And
how was that received, by the way? I'm a little curious. Were their parents going, "Oh no, we're not taking I mean, tell me, because we have considered that being part of our, part of our program also, but it's always a little bit of a tricky thing. So,
well, mentoring is also a legally protected practice in terms of mentoring. So there's confidentiality involved.
okay, yeah.
And so in many cases, if the young person says no, that's one thing. But if they agree to do it, and remember, this mentoring, if you don't carry out the fidelity of mentoring too, then you don't. Some people think of mentoring is, well, from time to time I'll go and have lunch with some kids. Yo, I'm a
Right,
great mentor,
right,
right?
Mhm.
right.
But the idea is if you're not spending, 1 to 2 hours every week with a young person, the same day, the same time, every week for at least a year, you're not mentoring.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so um, my mentors had the relationship and the trust to where answering the questions were not a problem, right?
Yeah.
And they knew that whatever we found out, unless it triggered the mandated reporting laws, that
Mm-hmm.
that they would be
Mhm.
safe, right? And it wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
cause drama and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we did it. The school district knew that we were doing it, right? And I began to get a lot of the results, and
Mm-hmm.
I started, understanding the young people we were working with, and if they had a 4 or above, we intensified our mentoring,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
So we used it as a trigger as to who should we be paying more attention to,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Who should we make sure that we're getting extra services to or offering extra services to?
Yeah.
Who should we be contacting? Whose family should we be contacting to offer more services? They don't know why we're
Right.
offering these more of these services, right? But all they know is we have something to offer and it's free. And hey, it might be able to help you and your family.
Well, it's a super easy thing to do, right? It's just getting the buy-in and, making sure that people, aren't afraid. But, the value of having that information and then being able to take that information and actually do something with it, right? So you mentioned, having more social work and mental experts at the schools, right? which is really a difficult thing right now, right? Like Marci and I work with some, like the community college up here in Folsom. They're struggling to have a therapist, even one day a week, right? And now they're even struggling to have a full-time nurse on campus, right? Like, so tell us a little bit more about that too. I know that
Sure.
that's an additional bill, right? That is
Right. Well,
that
actually, it's all incorporated into one. So
oh,
AB 1450 says that every child should have a universal screening, whether it's ACEs or mental health screening.
Okay.
And usually the mental health screening has to do with depression, anxiety. They call it the PHQ assessment, where it just asks questions such as, are you having trouble sleeping?
right.
Are you losing your appetite?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Are you losing hope in terms of yourself and your ability and your future? Right? Things like that that begin to be red flags
Mm-hmm.
that, hey, we might need to be offering some more services here. And so 1450 says not only should we be doing these universal screenings, but we need to have the mental health professionals on campus so that once they have been screened and their scores have been compiled, there's actually someone who knows what to do with them on
Yes.
campus.
So
Right.
important.
And, first the way I legislate is I just say, this is what the data says. The US Surgeon General, California's first Surgeon General,
Yes.
said that we should be doing universal screenings. And before I got out here, I just couldn't understand why they weren't doing it.
Yes.
And so I introduced the bill. Of course, everyone starts freaking out and it's mostly politics, which is interesting about this.
Oh yeah. Well, it
Yeah.
opens up a whole can of worms.
People
Right.
don't want to screen because if they find something out, then they will be responsible for doing something.
Yeah.
So they'd rather not know.
Yes.
And when
And
I
how's that
heard
working
that,
for us?
and when I heard that, I just said, whoa,
Yeah.
this is absolutely crazy.
Yes.
And so, of course, we just finished doing the Mental Health Services Act reform to be able to modernize how we fund mental health services and what we're going to prioritize.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still pushing 1450. It's a 2-year bill, but I still got something in the budget to allow at least a study to be done on how can schools implement universal screenings, right? So right now they're like, well, we don't even know if we can really do this and do it right. And so I said, okay, well, I at least got them to agree to create almost like a best practice so that when I make another push for it, they're able to actually have more confidence that it can be done because there's something that shows them how it should be done.
Right. Step by step.
So that's the ACEs, for the universal screening. But, so even next year, and actually this is right off the press, so I've never ever told anyone but half this, is that because I'm getting so much pushback from the schools, I'm actually going to require healthcare providers, similar to, now there's a new COVID shot that's available. There's a new flu shot that's available. Once those become available, what happens? We start getting things in the mail from our healthcare provider. We start getting texts and emails. Hey, we got another shot for you. Come on in, right? I want the same thing to happen for our young people when it comes to mental health screenings.
Yes.
And so I am going to shift right now the responsibility to be able to say, if you have a patient from the age of 10 to 18, right? there should 2 years shouldn't go by without you contacting the parents and saying, hey, we can provide you with a free health screening. Would you like to make an appointment?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
A mental health screening, right?
Right.
And so now I'm going to be doing it that way, trying to do it that way too, meaning all hands are on deck. We're trying to find any and everyone. This is everyone's responsibility to make this work.
Yes.
Because if we don't make this work, I mean, already the data is showing we are in some deep trouble.
Oh,
Yeah,
we are. I mean,
absolutely.
we have run up against all the same things, right? And we have LCSWs that are, working in the schools right now. And, we have had some opportunities. We worked with some nonprofits in San Diego, some underserved schools in the Bay Area. But yeah, all of a sudden, it's, social emotional learning, right? Right. So we were teaching that. I actually got certified. This was the most important thing to do. And I went to do all this work. Marci and I created this app to be able to do this so everyone could have access to it. And we were just getting this, like, because it had the term SEL. SEL, right? Because there are certain states that, are banning SEL books right now. So yeah, it's daunting. So Marci and I are doing the same thing you are. Like, there's got to be another way.
You're finding back doors. You're trying to.
That's right.
You're climbing through windows. You're trying.
That's right. It's me again. Hello.
We're going in the fire escape.
It just comes back to this whole idea that you're talking about, that we have to look at this. We can't push it under the rug. We're seeing the effects. The kids are stressed. The kids are depressed. The kids are attempting suicide, and we got to talk about it. Like the elephant in the room is sitting on our laps, and we can't keep ignoring it. So, gosh, I'm so grateful.
This is decades and even centuries of the stigma in terms of mental health, right?
Yes.
And then in some particular communities and many communities of color, it is just astronomical. And so I think that overall, we have to continue to break down the stigma when it comes to mental health, and put mental health in the same category as physical health, and respond to it in the exact same way. Right.
Exactly.
And so I think the idea is, and my response and many other responses usually, well, you mean if you can do a cancer screening, you're saying that it would be okay not to do a cancer screening because then you would have to do something about it?
Exactly.
Yes.
Right.
It's so ridiculous.
Are you saying that,
yes,
it's clear someone's leg is broken, but we can't prove it, because if we prove it, guess what? We might have to fix the leg.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and then we have to fix the generations before that and before that and before that. And those folks don't want us to talk about some of that.
And
stuff,
we haven't
right?
even talked about historical and intergenerational trauma.
Oh, yes.
Groups, right. I mean, it's a whole thing here.
Yes.
That needs to be done. But I think overall, though, is we just have to sound the alarm. We cannot allow institutions not to play a role in this. And we use our schools to make sure that kids get meals every day.
Yes.
But it's not the role of the school to do that. But we know that that's the best way to serve them. Well, because that's where they are the majority of their life, right? Yes. And it's the same thing with mental health. And so I'm just continuing to push universal screenings. And they now know that when it's my turn to ask questions in committees, they already know, here he comes again. Let's get ready. He's about to start doing his thing about universal screenings.
Well, we're going to come with you, because we're going to come with you with our armor and our swords, and we're right there with you.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for starting that important conversation. That's obviously that conversation needs to be had.
No, absolutely. And, we, on the floor of the assembly, we do annual resolutions about children's mental health and mental health month. And I'm always saying, matter of fact, it was interesting. Before we left from Sacramento, we were talking about, I think it was Suicide Awareness Week or something. And almost everyone on the floor of the assembly was crying at the end of the day. And my partner in crime in this mental health is Assemblymember Gail Pellerin, who has a story in and of herself in terms of suicides. And she told her story. Mm-hmm. And, then everyone else starts telling stories.
Yes.
But then I stood up, and I said, you know what? This is a sad moment, and we're all crying right now. But do you know how many bills we killed this year on mental health that could be helping the suicide rate?
Yes.
But we were afraid to step on people's toes. We were afraid to be innovative, right? And we wanted to uphold the status quo. I said, so remember how we're feeling right now, next year, because the question always to me in serving up and dealing with a problem is, are we doing everything we can? Are we doing everything in our power to?
Right.
And I said this in the beginning of the year, and I said this at the end of the year. And I said again, at the end of this year, I have to say, no, we chose not to do everything that we can. Yes. I said, we have failed our constituents.
Yeah.
Right? And so we got to remember how all of this stuff is connected. And we have to be aggressive on this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yes. I don't know if you know this about Marci and I, but we actually do some suicide training. We've done it for nonprofits here in the area. And we are big advocates for anyone doing this very difficult work. And in fact, Marci and I worked with some folks down in Southern California, and we produced a film called Never Alone. And it was made during COVID. With a bunch of students. One of the filmmakers is a friend of my husband, and his son's best friend had a suicide attempt. And so during that time, he made a movie. And so Marci and I, our goal around this film, we interviewed, 50 kids during this time, during COVID, around how they were feeling and what the affects were. And the goal for making this film was not for anyone to make any money, but for us to be able to use it to introduce it to every school. It's a musical, by the way. You'll have to go watch it. But it was for the schools to use it as a platform to have a discussion. Right. So the kids could talk about it. The parents could talk about it. The administration could talk about it. The kids could have a voice in how they were feeling, about the pressure they were feeling, about the isolation that they're feeling. And so anyway, this is available for you and everyone else. And again, let's talk about it. We made a big deal about it. We made a movie about it, and we struggled to get schools to show the film and have a discussion.
Right? The interesting thing is, one thing, it ended up being one of my sayings in the nonprofit world when we talk about those of us who engage in youth development. And it became apparent to me that the number one issue of why young people don't get what they need are adult issues. It's the adult issues that are stopping young people from getting what they need.
Yes.
And because when it comes to a whole host of issues, whether it's issues of history and racism and mental health and all kinds of stuff, our young people are ready and able and eager to have these conversations.
Yes, they are.
It's the adults that are trying to run from it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And, so for me, and that's one of the things that I kind of wish I was back on the ground doing a lot of this stuff, right? When we're in the midst of a mental health crisis with young people, to be able to be, I'm also I've been trained on, restorative circles and restorative
Mm.
practices. And, I used to host my own healing circles and all those things. Like, I wish I had the opportunity to be back on the ground,
Yeah.
to serve people, but at the same time, to be able to affect all kids within the state of California is
Yes.
also important work too. But I think the
Same.
idea is that our young people are ready. They're asking, they're screaming for help,
They are.
whether it's through their words or through their behavior.
Mm-hmm.
They're asking for it, and we're sitting here saying, "Well, now I feel uncomfortable as an adult."
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
that's sort of the concept around the Parent Warrior podcast, right? So the whole idea why we started to do this was because we were realizing also that, just like you said, we know we've been working with these kids. We know they're ready. They want help. They love these tools. They love to talk about this stuff. But it was the parents that were really, we felt like holding them back and not allowing them to be heard or to be understood in what they were feeling. And so that's why we're doing this. We're trying to break down the stigma of mental health, and also the stigma around parents, because if we have this lovely youth coach right now, and she's amazing, and she works with these kids, but then also tries to bring the parents into the conversation, right, so that they can work together and have communication and all of that. So that's why you're here. Hopefully there's a whole pile
Yeah,
of parents
Yeah.
who are listening and who are willing to be vulnerable and have these discussions. Right.
And,
Well,
we're really glad that you're doing this work. I understand what you're saying about wanting to be on the ground and doing that great work in your community, but what you're doing for the whole state is so important. And we're really excited to see the bills you're working on and know that these are going to be things that are going to affect kids all over and families all over the state of California.
no, absolutely. I mean, the good news is out of the bills that I've had in terms of mental health, one is sitting on the governor's desk for him to make a decision on, and that is my AB 1451, which really, there's always practical things you can do also to make mental health more available, right? And sometimes it has nothing to do with funding. And if you followed the state's budget discussion, we were always talking about this is going to be a small, a fragile budget, a small budget. We're not going to have as much money as we've had before in the past, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was always thinking, what are some common sense things that we could do?
Mm-hmm.
And AB 1451 basically just says that if I go into a doctor's office and he finds that I might be in need of some mental health services, again, I'm in the doctor's office not for a mental health issue. I'm dealing, maybe it's my annual physical, maybe it's a rash, maybe it's something. But through the conversation, they find that there might be some mental health services that are needed.
Mm-hmm.
This bill says that if signed, that my doctor doesn't have to get the permission of the health insurance to be able to provide mental health services or provide the referral. They can just do it. And again, because in many cases, right, you still have to, we all know how health insurance works in many cases, where
Yeah.
in order to get even a life-saving service, right, it still has to be signed off by the health insurance plans.
Right.
Right.
This one takes health insurance plans out of the picture and says, no, you see a mental health, we want to get rid of any reason why someone has to wait to receive mental health services.
Right.
And so
That's great.
that's what this bill does. And was happy to see that we were able to get it to the governor's desk.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
good work you're doing there.
I know. Marci, are we really running out of time? Because I want to hang out.
I know.
Dr. Jackson. Well, we want to come to your neighborhood, and we want to put our boots on the street and do some work with you. Does your nonprofit still exist? Can we do work
Absolutely.
there?
It is still kicking. It has a life of its own now. And you've already met some of my staff that can put you in contact with them. And, they're still doing the same practices and the same things that I implemented in the organization before I left.
That's wonderful. Well, I want to be able to share how people can look up your bills and support them. I know that on the website, there's a sample letter for people who want to send some support for these bills to their representatives here in the state of California. So your website is a60.asmdc.org. Is that correct?
Yeah, and let me just make sure that I say it right. I'm not good at I'm still learning my own stuff. So yes,
we're gonna put it in the show notes too. We'll put a link in there.
Okay.
So
absolutely.
It talks about all three of your mental health bills and some of the other good work that you're doing. But then what I love, if people really are hearing this and saying, yes, we need this in California, go to the Assemblyman's website and grab those sample letters and send them to your folks so that they'll stop giving him so much guff when he brings these things to the floor to try to get them moving.
Absolutely. And again, that is A as in Apple 60.asmdc.org.
Great. And it will be in the show notes too, if you missed it and you want to grab it. But thank you so much, Assemblymember Jackson. We really appreciate your time, and we so appreciate all the fabulous work you're doing for our state and for our kids and our families around these just important issues.
Absolutely. It's been such a pleasure to be with you all. And again, we have a moral responsibility to deal with this crisis, and everyone can play a role in it.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Again.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And now for a moment about meditation and how it can help you and your family to self-regulate and mindfully return to a place of calm and centeredness. Our Core Tools platform consists of a number of proven tools and techniques that are designed to reduce stress, anxiety, and overwhelm in spite of what's going on in your world. Meditation is just one of these powerful tools, and through a special partnership with Donna Appadone, we have created a group of meditations available only on our platform and via Donna's own website. Here's Donna.
What is this heartbreak? If life is to be lived in joy, why is there heartbreak? Why is there sadness? Why do we feel this crushing sorrow? Hi, I'm Donna Appadone. I'm the person who writes and produces meditations for this podcast and for the Core Experience website. When we feel sadness or disappointment, or when we're grieving over something, it feels like the worst time ever. There are bad days for all of us. There are also wonderful times for all of us. And that's an important thing to remember. There is a balance. We all feel things differently. We all respond to things differently, but we all have a balance of happy and sad and up and down and good and bad. You never have to despair because things always naturally balance out. Remember, whatever is happening with you right now, you can do anything you set your mind to do. Two halves make the whole, yin and yang. My acceptance of this flow humbles me. My acceptance of this flow gives me hope. Life is balanced. And I accept the balance in my life.
Donna's book, called Drive Time Meditations, is a collection of 183 of her purpose-driven motivators. Drive Time Meditations is available on Amazon.
Thanks for listening to the Warrior Parent Podcast. You can find us at coreexperience.org. You can find out more about today's guest by visiting his official page at a60.asmdc.org. Then you will also see there how you can support his mental health bills in the state of California. Make sure you join us next week for another informative conversation to help you and your family show up mindfully, purposefully, and joyfully with each other and in your community.
Our meditation segment is produced by Donna Apidone with music from Scott Holmes. The full collection of meditations is in Donna's book, Drive Time Meditations, available on Amazon and at donnaapidone.com. Thanks to Samuel Hale, LLC, for sponsoring this podcast. Technical and marketing supporting comes from Inspire Your Brand. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of the host, the producers, or the financial supporters. I'm Debbie DiManno.
And I'm Marci Mitchell. The Warrior Parent Podcast is a production of Cour Experience.